The fluorescent lights in Dr. Morrison's office hummed with a persistence that matched my anxiety. I'd been sitting in that stiff leather chair for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall insisted only 12 minutes had passed. My hands were trembling, and I kept wiping my palms on my jeans, leaving dark patches on the denim. The walls were covered with diplomas and certificates, each one a testament to Dr. Morrison's expertise in nephrology, but none of them could tell me what I desperately needed to know. Was I going to live? At 32 years old, I never imagined I'd be facing kidney failure. Life had always seemed so reliable, so predictable. I was Sarah Chen, a high school English teacher from Portland, Oregon, who spent her weekends grading papers and hiking with her golden retriever, Murphy. I had a small apartment with plants I somehow managed to keep alive, a close circle of friends, and parents who called every Sunday without fail. My life was ordinary in the best possible way, until 6 months ago, when the fatigue became unbearable and the routine blood work revealed that my kidneys were failing at an alarming rate. The disease had a long, complicated name that I could never quite pronounce correctly. What I did understand was that without a transplant, I had maybe a year, perhaps less. The waiting list was impossibly long, and my parents, both in their late 60s, weren't viable donors due to their own health issues. My friends had rushed to get tested, bless them, but none had been compatible. With each failed match, I felt hope slipping further away, like sand through my fingers. The door opened, and Dr. Morrison walked in with a file tucked under his arm. He was a tall man in his 50s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, the kind of doctor who actually listened when you spoke. But today, something was different about his expression. It wasn't the careful neutrality I'd grown accustomed to, nor was it the gentle sympathy that usually preceded bad news. "Sarah," he said, settling into his chair across from me. "We found a match." The words hit me like a physical force. I felt my breath catch in my throat, and for a moment, the room seemed to tilt slightly. "What? How? I thought everyone close to me had been tested. Is it someone from the donor registry?" Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "That's the remarkable part. The match came through our database, but it's not an anonymous donor. Well, this is highly unusual. The match is a young man named Marcus Thompson. He's 28 years old, and according to the genetic markers, he's your half-brother." The world stopped. Just completely stopped. I stared at Dr. Morrison, certain I'd misheard. "That's impossible. I'm an only child. My parents never mentioned any other children. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Sarah. The genetic testing is conclusive. You share approximately 50% of your DNA, which indicates you share one biological parent. I know this must be shocking, but Marcus has already been informed, and he's expressed a willingness to proceed with the donation. He'd like to meet you, actually, if you're open to it." My mind was reeling. A brother. I had a brother. For 32 years, I'd navigated the world as an only child, sometimes wishing for a sibling, especially during lonely childhood afternoons. And now, just when I needed one most desperately, he appeared like something out of a fairy tale. But fairy tales weren't real, and this situation was raising more questions than it answered. "How did he even know to get tested?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's been on the donor registry for years, apparently. When your profile went up, the system flagged the genetic connection. He was as surprised as you are." I drove home in a daze, barely remembering the route. My apartment felt different when I walked in, as if the revelation had somehow altered the physical space around me. Murphy greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging, completely oblivious to the fact that his owner's entire understanding of her identity had just been shattered. I sat on the floor with him, burying my face in his golden fur, and let the tears come. That evening, I called my parents. My hands shook as I dialed, and my mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Sweetheart, we weren't expecting to hear from you until Sunday. Is everything all right? Mom, I need you and Dad to tell me the truth about something. The words came out harder than I intended, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. What is it, honey? You're scaring me. Did either of you have another child, before me or after or at any point? Because the hospital found a match for my transplant, and they're saying he's my half-brother. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched on for so long that I actually checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, my father's voice came through, heavy and resigned. Sarah, we need to talk. Can we come up this weekend? Dad, I need to know now. Please. Another pause. Then, my mother's voice, thick with tears. It was me. Before I met your father, I was young and in a relationship that didn't work out. I got pregnant, and at 19 I wasn't ready to be a mother. I gave the baby up for adoption. It was a closed adoption, and I never knew what happened to him. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I always meant to tell you, but as the years went by, it seemed less and less relevant. I never imagined. The revelation confirmed what Dr. Morrison had told me, but hearing it from my mother made it real in a way that medical jargon couldn't. I had a brother. My mother had given birth to a child and given him away, carrying that secret for over 3 decades. I felt a confusing tangle of emotions: anger at being kept in the dark, sympathy for the impossible position my young mother had been in, an overwhelming curiosity about this stranger who shared my blood. Does Dad know? I asked. Yes, my father said gently. Your mother told me early in our relationship. We've always respected her decision, and we talked about telling you many times. There just never seemed like a right moment. Sarah, honey, please don't hate us. I didn't hate them. I couldn't. But I felt unmoored, as if the foundation of my life had shifted beneath my feet. We talked for another hour, my mother sharing details she'd kept locked away for so long. His father had been a musician, transient and unreliable. She'd been working at a diner to put herself through community college. The pregnancy had been unexpected, and she'd known she couldn't provide the life a child deserved. She'd chosen a good family, she said, people who desperately wanted a baby. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, processing everything. Marcus Thompson, my brother. The man who might save my life was connected to me in the most fundamental way possible, yet we were complete strangers. Dr. Morrison had given me his contact information, but I'd been too overwhelmed to reach out immediately. Now, sitting alone with Murphy's head in my lap, I pulled out my phone and stared at the number. What do you say to the person who shares your DNA but none of your history? How do you bridge a gap of 28 years in a single conversation? My finger hovered over the screen for a long moment before I finally typed out a message. Hi, Marcus. This is Sarah Chen. Dr. Morrison gave me your number. I don't really know what to say except thank you, and I'd very much like to meet you if you're still willing. The response came faster than I expected. Hi, Sarah. Yes, absolutely. How about coffee tomorrow? There's a place called the Blue Door on Morrison Street. 2 p.m.? I knew the Blue Door well. It was one of those cozy Portland coffee shops with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of place where conversations could unfold slowly and comfortably. It felt like neutral ground, public enough to feel safe, but intimate enough for the kind of conversation we needed to have. I'll be there, I typed back. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining what Marcus might look like, what his voice might sound like, whether we'd have anything in common beyond our shared genetic material. I constructed and deconstructed 100 different versions of him in my mind, each one more fantastical than the last. By the time morning came, I was exhausted and wired simultaneously, running on anxiety and anticipation. I changed my outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and a simple blue sweater. I wanted to look approachable, but not like I was trying too hard. Murphy watched my preparations with patient confusion, his head tilted in that way dogs do when they're trying to understand human behavior. I kissed his head before leaving, grateful for his uncomplicated affection. The blue door was moderately crowded when I arrived, filled with the usual mix of students hunched over laptops and friends catching up over lattes. I ordered a chamomile tea, my hands too unsteady for caffeine, and found a table near the window. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped, and I studied each newcomer, looking for some family resemblance, some sign that would tell me, that's him. At 2:03, a young man walked in, and I knew immediately. He had my mother's eyes, that same warm brown color I saw in old photographs. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and an athletic build. He wore a worn leather jacket over a gray Henley, and there was something about the way he moved, a careful grace, that made me think of my mother's old stories about his father, the musician. Our eyes met across the room, and recognition flashed between us. It wasn't about physical resemblance, though that was there in subtle ways. It was something deeper, some inexplicable pull that said, you belong to my story. He walked over, and we both stood awkwardly for a moment before he extended his hand. Sarah. Marcus. I took his hand, and the simple contact felt momentous. Thank you for coming. Of course. He sat down, and I noticed his hands were trembling slightly, just like mine. I have to admit, I've been nervous all day, rehearsing what to say. Me too. I went through about a dozen scripts in my head, but now they all seem ridiculous. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more vulnerable. Maybe we should just start with the basics then. I'll go first. I'm Marcus Thompson. I'm a paramedic here in Portland, and I grew up in Beaverton with 2 amazing parents who told me I was adopted when I was 8. I've known for most of my life that I had biological family out there somewhere, but I never actively searched. It always seemed like it might disrupt the life I had, you know? I nodded, absorbing this information. A paramedic, someone who spent his days saving lives, was now offering to save mine. I'm Sarah Chen. I teach English at Roosevelt High School, and I had absolutely no idea you existed until yesterday. My mother gave you up for adoption when she was 19. She never told me, and honestly, I'm still processing all of this. I can't even imagine, Marcus said, his voice gentle. At least I grew up knowing I was adopted. To have this dropped on you as an adult, especially under these circumstances. I'm sorry you're dealing with all of this. Don't apologize. If anything, I should be apologizing to you. You're being asked to go through major surgery for a stranger. You're not a stranger, he said firmly. You're my sister. I know that sounds weird to say out loud, but it's true. We might not have grown up together, but we're connected. And honestly, when I got the call from the donor registry and they explained the genetic match, it felt like fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it. I've been on that registry for 5 years, hoping I could help someone. I never dreamed it would be my own sister. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. The conversation flowed with unexpected ease, moving from the medical logistics to our lives, our interests, our histories. I learned that Marcus had always been drawn to helping people, joining the volunteer fire department in his teens before eventually training as a paramedic. He loved hiking, just like me, though his favorite trails were different from mine. He played guitar, a connection to the father he'd never known. He had a sarcastic sense of humor that reminded me of my own, and he made terrible puns that made me groan and laugh simultaneously. In turn, I told him about my love of literature, about the students who frustrated and inspired me in equal measure, about Murphy and my small circle of friends. I told him about discovering my illness, about the fear and uncertainty that had colored the past 6 months. He listened intently, asking questions and offering the kind of steady support that I imagined a brother would provide. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said as our conversation began to wind down. What was it like growing up as an only child? Did you ever wish for a sibling? All the time, I admitted, especially when I was younger. I used to imagine having a brother or sister, someone to share secrets with and fight with and just understand. I'd make up entire stories about this imaginary sibling. I guess in a weird way, you were always there in my mind, just not in the way I expected. I had the opposite experience, he said thoughtfully. I always knew there was someone out there connected to me biologically. Sometimes I'd wonder if I had siblings, if they were living parallel lives somewhere. I'd pass people on the street and think, could that be them? It was like having a missing piece of a puzzle that you knew existed but couldn't find. And now you've found it. Now I've found you. He smiled again, that warm expression that was already becoming familiar. Look, Sarah, I know this is all happening fast, and the circumstances are intense. But I want you to know that I'm doing this because I want to. Not out of obligation or guilt or anything like that. You're my sister, and if I can help you, then that's what I'm going to do. Tears pricked my eyes. I don't know how to thank you adequately. This is literally my life you're saving. You don't have to thank me. Just promise me that after all this is over, we'll stay in each other's lives. No more lost years, okay? Okay, I whispered. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I saw each other regularly. We met for coffee, took Murphy on long walks through Forest Park, and slowly built a relationship that felt both brand new and ancient. He came to dinner at my apartment, where he charmed my friends with his stories from the ambulance and his terrible cooking jokes. I met his parents, Tom and Linda Thompson, a lovely couple who welcomed me with open arms and teary eyes, grateful that their son had found his biological family but clearly anxious about the upcoming surgery. My own parents came up from Eugene, and the meeting between my mother and Marcus was something I'll never forget. They stood facing each other in my living room, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then my mother reached out tentatively and touched his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You have your father's nose," she said softly, "and my eyes. I wondered so many times what you looked like if you were happy, if you knew you were loved even though I couldn't keep you." "I was happy," Marcus assured her. "I am happy. And I never doubted that you made the decision out of love." They talked for hours that day, filling in the gaps of 28 years. My mother told him about his biological father, a man named James who had drifted out of her life long before Marcus was born. She shared stories of her pregnancy, of the agony of giving him up, of the years of wondering and hoping. Marcus, in turn, told her about his childhood, his parents, his life. It was painful and beautiful and cathartic for both of them. The surgery was scheduled for early November, giving us just enough time to complete all the necessary medical preparations. As the date approached, I found myself experiencing a strange mix of emotions. I was grateful, obviously, overwhelmed by Marcus's generosity. But I was also terrified. Not just of the surgery itself, though that was scary enough, but of what it meant. I would be carrying a piece of my brother inside me, literally dependent on him for my survival. The intimacy of that felt almost unbearable. "It's normal to feel conflicted," Dr. Morrison assured me during one of our pre-surgical consultations. "You're facing a major medical procedure, and you're grappling with a complete restructuring of your family identity. Anyone would be overwhelmed." "What if something goes wrong?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been keeping me awake at night. "What if I'm responsible for something happening to him?" "The risks are minimal," Dr. Morrison said, though his eyes were kind with understanding. "Marcus is young and healthy, and people live perfectly normal lives with one kidney. But I understand your concern. This is someone you've come to care about deeply." That was an understatement. In just a few short weeks, Marcus had become one of the most important people in my life. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm, calling each other at random times, sharing stupid memes, having deep conversations about life and death and everything in between. He'd started calling me Sis, and every time he did, my heart swelled with affection and disbelief. I had a brother. After 32 years of being an only child, I had a brother who was funny and kind and brave enough to give me a part of himself. The night before the surgery, we all gathered at my apartment. Me, Marcus, both sets of parents, and my closest friends. It wasn't exactly a party, more of a vigil. Everyone trying to stay positive while dealing with their own anxiety. Marcus, true to form, spent most of the evening making jokes and trying to keep everyone's spirits up. "Look at it this way," he said, addressing the room with a beer in hand. "After tomorrow, Sarah and I will be even closer than normal siblings. We'll be like those freaky twins who claim they can feel each other's pain from across the country." "Please don't feel my pain," I shot back. "I'm about to have major surgery. The last thing I need is phantom sympathy pain radiating from Beaverton." Everyone laughed, grateful for the moment of levity. But as the evening wore on and people began to leave, the weight of what we were about to face settled over us. Finally, it was just Marcus and me, sitting on my couch with Murphy sprawled across both our laps. "Are you scared?" I asked him quietly. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also weirdly calm. Like, this feels right, you know? I've spent my whole adult life running toward emergencies, trying to help people. This is the most direct way I've ever been able to save someone's life. Plus, it's you. My sister. How could I not do this?" "I just want you to know," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "that no matter what happens tomorrow, you've already given me more than you could possibly know. Before I met you, I was facing death alone, even with all these people who love me. But you've given me family in a way I never had before. You've given me a brother. And you've given me a sister," he replied, pulling me into a hug. "We're going to be okay, Sarah. Both of us. We're going to come through this, and then we're going to have years and years to make up for lost time." The surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m. I arrived at the hospital at 5:30, my parents at my side. Marcus was already there, in his pre-op room, and they let me see him briefly before we both went under. He looked young in his hospital gown, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before, but his smile was steady. "See you on the other side, sis," he said, squeezing my hand. "See you on the other side." The next thing I remember was waking up in the recovery room, groggy and disoriented, with an incredible thirst and a pulling sensation in my side. My mother was there, and when she saw my eyes open, she burst into tears. "It worked," she said. "The transplant worked. Marcus is in recovery too, and he's doing great. You're both going to be fine." The relief was overwhelming. I let myself cry, releasing all the fear and tension I'd been carrying for months. I had survived. Marcus had survived. We had done this impossible thing together. Recovery was slow and painful, but Marcus and I went through it side by side, our rooms just down the hall from each other. As soon as we were both stable enough, the nurses wheeled us into the same room, claiming we healed better when we could annoy each other properly. They weren't wrong. We spent hours talking, watching terrible daytime television, and comparing surgical scars like kids showing off their coolest possessions. "Mine's bigger," Marcus declared, lifting his gown slightly to show the neat line of stitches on his side. "Bigger isn't always better," I countered. "Mine's more aesthetically placed." "You're just saying that because you're losing. I'm literally winning at life right now because of you. So I'm pretty sure I win the scar competition too." 2 weeks post-surgery, we were both released from the hospital. The road ahead was long, filled with medications and follow-up appointments and careful monitoring, but the prognosis was excellent. My body was accepting Marcus's kidney beautifully, and he was recovering faster than expected. his young body already adapting to life with one kidney. 3 months after the surgery, I was back in my classroom, teaching To Kill a Mockingbird, to a room full of sophomores who were more interested in their phones than Harper Lee's prose. But I didn't mind. Every morning I woke up feeling strong, feeling alive, feeling grateful for this second chance. The medication schedule was rigorous, and I tired more easily than I used to. But these were small prices to pay for life itself. Marcus and I had developed a tradition of Sunday dinners, alternating between his place and mine. We'd cook together, or more accurately, I'd cook while he offered unhelpful suggestions and taste-tested everything. Our parents would join us sometimes, all 4 of them, and the sight of them around one table, blending 2 families into something new and whole, never failed to move me. On one such Sunday, about 6 months after the transplant, Marcus and I were walking Murphy through the neighborhood after dinner. The Portland spring was in full bloom, cherry blossoms drifting through the air like pink snow. We walked in comfortable silence for a while before Marcus spoke. "I've been thinking about something," he said, "about how this all happened, the odds of us finding each other like this, at exactly the moment you needed me most. It's astronomical. It makes me wonder if there's something more to it, some kind of design or purpose." "You're getting philosophical on me," I teased, but I knew what he meant. I'd had the same thoughts countless times. "I'm serious. Think about it. I joined the donor registry 5 years ago on a whim, after we brought a kid into the ER who needed a transplant and didn't have a match. I never really expected to be called. Then you get sick, and of all the millions of people in the database, the system matches us. Not just as compatible donors, but as siblings. What are the chances?" "Pretty slim," I admitted. "But maybe that's just how life works. Random chance that feels like fate when you look back on it. Maybe. Or maybe we were always meant to find each other." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "You know what the weirdest part is? I don't feel like I lost anything by giving you my kidney. I feel like I gained everything. I have a sister I never knew I wanted, and I get to watch you live your life. That's not a sacrifice. That's a gift." I hugged him tightly, this brother who had appeared in my life like magic when I needed him most. "You're going to make me cry, and I just did my makeup." "Too late. You're already crying." He was right. I was crying, but they were good tears, grateful tears. We continued our walk, talking about everything and nothing, and I marveled at how natural it felt to have him in my life. It was as if the 28 years of separation had been merely a pause, and we'd simply picked up a conversation that had always been waiting to happen. As summer approached, I began to notice something odd. Small things at first, things I dismissed as coincidence or my imagination. I'd be thinking about Marcus, and seconds later, he'd call. I'd have a craving for a specific food, and he'd show up with exactly that. Our tastes in music, which had been discussed but never deeply explored, turned out to be eerily similar. We'd start sentences at the same time, saying exactly the same thing. "It's the kidney," Marcus joked when I mentioned it. "We're becoming a hive mind." "That's not how organs work," I replied, but I wasn't entirely sure. There had been something about transplant recipients taking on characteristics of their donors, though the scientific community was divided on whether it was real or just wishful thinking. In August, something happened that I couldn't explain away. I was at home, grading essays on a Saturday afternoon, when I suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of panic. It wasn't my panic, though. It felt external, like someone else's fear had somehow invaded my consciousness. My chest tightened, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that something was wrong with Marcus. I called him immediately, but it went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I called his parents, my hands shaking. Linda answered, her voice calm but concerned when I explained my sudden anxiety. "He's at work," she said. "His shift doesn't end until 6. I'm sure he's fine, honey. He probably just has his phone off. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I paced my apartment, trying to rationalize what I was experiencing. It was probably nothing, just my overactive imagination combined with the deep bond Marcus and I had formed. But the panic persisted, growing stronger. Finally, unable to stand it anymore, I grabbed my keys and drove to the station where Marcus worked. The ambulance bay was quiet when I arrived, and I felt foolish standing there in my grading clothes, probably overreacting to nothing. But as I was about to leave, one of Marcus's colleagues came out, and his expression made my blood run cold. "Are you Sarah?" he asked. "Marcus's sister?" "Yes." "What happened? Is he okay?" "There was an accident. A call went bad, and Marcus got hurt. He's at Providence Medical Center. He's stable, but you should go." I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember parking or running through the emergency room entrance. The next clear memory I have is standing in Marcus's room, looking at him lying in a hospital bed with a bandage wrapped around his head and his left arm in a cast. "Hey, sis," he said weakly when he saw me. "Before you freak out, I'm fine. Mostly fine. Concussion and a broken arm, but nothing major." "What happened?" I sat down next to him, taking his good hand in mine. "We responded to a car accident. I was helping extract a passenger when a drunk driver plowed into the scene. Hit me pretty good, but it could have been so much worse. The other medic pushed me out of the way at the last second." "When did this happen?" He checked the clock on the wall. "About 2 hours ago, I think. Time's a bit fuzzy. 2 hours ago. Right when I'd felt that overwhelming panic." I stared at him, trying to process what this meant. "Marcus, I knew something was wrong. I felt it. I was at home, and suddenly I just knew you were in trouble." He looked at me with those brown eyes we'd inherited from our mother, and I saw my own wonder reflected back at me. "The kidney," he said simply. "That's ridiculous. That's not scientifically possible." "Maybe not. But we both know something changed after the transplant. We've been noticing it for months. Maybe we share more than just DNA and an organ now. Maybe we're connected in a way that science hasn't figured out how to measure yet." Over the next few weeks, as Marcus recovered from his accident, we paid closer attention to the strange connection between us. It wasn't constant or overwhelming, but it was there. We could sense each other's strong emotions, particularly distress or joy. We'd think of each other at the same moment. We'd have similar dreams. It was subtle but undeniable. "Maybe it's just what siblings are supposed to feel," Marcus suggested during one of our conversations about it. "Maybe this is normal, and we're just noticing it more because we didn't grow up together. Or maybe," I countered, "the transplant created a biological bond that amplified our existing genetic connection. There are documented cases of transplant recipients taking on characteristics of their donors: memory, preferences, even personality traits." "I always wanted to be psychic," Marcus said with a grin. "Though I imagined it would be more useful, like being able to predict lottery numbers instead of knowing when my sister is eating ice cream at midnight. That was one time, and I was stressed about finals. It was 3 times last week. Life settled into a new normal. Marcus fully recovered from his accident and returned to work, though his colleagues teased him mercilessly about his sister's spidey sense. I continued teaching, enjoying the energy of my students and the rhythm of the academic year. Our families had fully integrated, with holidays and birthdays becoming big, chaotic affairs that involved both sets of parents and an ever-expanding circle of relatives. A year after the transplant, I organized a celebration at my apartment. It had been 1 year since Marcus had given me his kidney. 1 year since I'd been given a second chance at life. 1 year since I'd found the brother I never knew existed. Everyone came. Marcus and his parents, my closest friends, Marcus's colleagues from the fire station. even some of my students who had been following our story. Standing in my crowded living room, looking at all these people who had supported us through everything, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Murphy was making his rounds, collecting pets and treats from every visitor. Marcus was telling an embarrassing story about me to a captive audience. My mother was showing old photos to Linda Thompson, the two women who had shaped Marcus's life in different ways, finding common ground in their love for him. I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to say something," I announced, and the room quieted. A year ago, I was facing the end of my life. I was scared and alone, even surrounded by people who loved me. And then this guy showed up. I gestured to Marcus, who ducked his head sheepishly. This complete stranger who turned out to be my brother offered to save my life without hesitation. And he did. But he gave me so much more than just a kidney. He gave me family in a way I'd never experienced before. He gave me a connection I didn't know I was missing. "Okay, now you're definitely going to make me cry," Marcus interrupted, but his eyes were already wet. "Too bad I'm not done," I continued. "I used to think that family was the people you grew up with, the people who shared your history. But Marcus taught me that family is also the people you choose, the people who show up when you need them most, the people who would literally give you a piece of themselves to keep you alive. So thank you, little brother, for finding me, for saving me, and for being exactly the family I needed." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus pulled me into a hug. "You're welcome, big sister," he whispered. "But for the record, I'm taller than you, so technically I should be the big brother." "That's not how it works. Pretty sure it is." The party continued late into the evening, filled with laughter and love and the comfortable chaos of family. As people began to leave, Marcus and I found ourselves on my apartment balcony, looking out over the Portland skyline. The city lights twinkled in the darkness, and the air was cool with the promise of autumn. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't gotten sick?" Marcus asked. "All the time," I admitted. In some ways, my kidney disease was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But it was also the thing that brought you into my life. I don't know how to reconcile those two truths. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe life is just like that, terrible and wonderful all mixed together, and we don't get to separate the good from the bad. We just have to accept the whole messy package. I leaned my head on his shoulder, this brother who had become one of the most important people in my world. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't around to appreciate it for the first 32 years of my life." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe around us. I thought about all the improbable events that had led to this moment. My illness, the donor registry, the genetic match, the choice Marcus had made to save a stranger who turned out to be family. Any one of those things could have gone differently, and we might never have found each other. But we had. Against all odds, through a combination of tragedy and chance and choice, we had found each other. And now, with a piece of him literally keeping me alive, we were bound together in a way that transcended normal sibling relationships. We were connected by blood and choice and sacrifice, by shared DNA and shared organs, by a bond that had formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. "Hey, Sarah," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to react." My stomach tightened with worry. "What is it?" "The day I got the call about the genetic match, before I knew it was you, I almost said no. I was scared. The idea of major surgery, of giving up an organ, even to save someone's life, it terrified me. I sat with that fear for about 3 hours, and I was genuinely considering backing out. I pulled back to look at him. "What changed your mind?" "They told me it was my sister, my biological sister. And I realized that I'd been given an incredible gift, the chance to meet you and save your life at the same time. How could I say no to that? But I want you to know that if I had backed out, if I'd let fear win, we never would have met. You would have gone on thinking you were an only child, and I would have gone on with my life never knowing I had a sister. That terrifies me more than any surgery ever could. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. I'm glad you were brave. Me too. You know what the craziest part is? Sometimes I forget that I only have one kidney now. It feels so normal, so right, to have given it to you. Like this was always how it was supposed to be. Like that kidney was always meant to be yours, and I was just holding on to it until you needed it. I wiped my tears away, laughing through them. That's the most beautiful and weird thing anyone has ever said to me. I'm full of beautiful and weird things. It's part of my charm. We went back inside, where the party had dwindled down to just our parents and a few close friends. My mother was showing Linda more photos, this time of me as a child. I watched them lean over the album together, pointing and laughing at pictures of me with missing teeth and terrible haircuts, and I felt a deep sense of rightness. These two women, who had both shaped Marcus in their own ways, had found friendship through us. My father and Tom were deep in conversation about hiking trails, planning a trip for all of us to go camping in the Cascades next summer. It was surreal to think that a year ago, these people had been strangers to each other, and now they were planning family vacations together. As the evening finally drew to a close, and everyone prepared to leave, Marcus pulled me aside one more time. I got you something, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to me. Marcus, you didn't have to get me anything. You already gave me a kidney. Just open it. I unwrapped the box carefully to find a delicate silver necklace with 2 interlocking circles. It was simple, but beautiful, the kind of jewelry I would have chosen for myself. It's perfect, I said. Read the inscription. I held it up to the light and saw tiny words engraved on the inside of one circle. Found at last. My throat tightened with emotion. I had a matching bracelet made for myself, Marcus said, rolling up his sleeve to show me a leather bracelet with a silver plate that bore the same inscription. Because that's what we are. 2 pieces that were lost but are now found. I know it's cheesy, but... It's perfect, I interrupted, putting the necklace on. It's absolutely perfect. After everyone left and I was alone with Murphy, I sat on my couch and touched the necklace, feeling the weight of it against my skin. Found at last. It was true. For all 32 years of my life, I'd been missing something without knowing it. And Marcus had been out there, living his life, not knowing he was missing someone too. The disease that had threatened to take my life had instead given me something precious. A brother, a connection, a sense of belonging that I hadn't known I was lacking. It had forced both of us to confront questions of identity and family, to expand our understanding of what those words meant. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos from the evening. There was one that someone had taken of Marcus and me, standing side by side, laughing at something. We didn't look that much alike, but there was something in our expressions, in the tilt of our heads, in the warmth of our smiles, that marked us as siblings. You could see the connection even in a photograph. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Made it home. Thanks for tonight. Love you, sis. Love you too, little brother, I typed back, adding, and you're still not the big brother, no matter how tall you are. His response was a string of laughing emojis followed by, we'll see about that. The months continued to pass, each one bringing new adventures and deepening the bond between Marcus and me. We hiked Mount Hood together in the spring, the exertion leaving us both breathless but triumphant at the summit. We took a road trip to the coast, spending a weekend in a tiny cabin where we stayed up late, talking about everything from philosophy to our favorite cartoons as kids. We started a tradition of monthly movie nights, alternating who picked the film, though we both complained bitterly about each other's choices. The connection between us continued to manifest in strange and wonderful ways. I'd be in the middle of teaching when I'd suddenly know that Marcus was thinking about me. He'd call during his lunch break, confirming that he'd been remembering something funny I'd said. Once, he showed up at my apartment with soup when I was coming down with a cold, claiming he'd just had a feeling I needed it. He was right. It's like having a guardian angel who's actually just your annoying brother, I told my best friend Rachel over coffee one afternoon. It sounds amazing, she said wistfully. I've had siblings my whole life, and we've never had anything like that. You two are like something out of a movie. A very weird movie, I agreed, but I wouldn't change it for anything. My health continued to improve. The kidney was functioning beautifully, and Dr. Morrison declared me one of his most successful transplant cases. The medications had become routine, the follow-up appointments less frequent. I was running again, something I never thought I'd be able to do. Marcus and I had even signed up for a 5K together, raising money for organ donation awareness. On the day of the race, both our families came out to support us. We wore matching shirts that said Kidney Brothers, with an arrow pointing to Marcus that said The Donor, and an arrow pointing to me that said The Grateful. It was corny and perfect, and we posed for about 100 photos before the race even started. We didn't win, not even close, but we crossed the finish line together, holding hands and laughing. It was one of the best days of my life. This simple act of running that represented everything I'd almost lost and everything I'd gained. That evening, exhausted and happy, we all went out for dinner at a restaurant downtown. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic, and I found myself just listening for a while, taking it all in. My mother telling a story about young Marcus that she'd learned from Linda. My father and Tom debating the best route for our upcoming camping trip. Marcus teasing me about my form during the race. This was family. Not perfect, not traditional, but real and loving and exactly what I needed. 2 years after the transplant, Marcus started dating someone seriously. Her name was Jennifer. She was a nurse at a different hospital, and she was perfect for him. She had his same dry sense of humor and generous spirit. When he brought her to meet me, I was prepared to be protective, to scrutinize her worthiness. But within minutes, I adored her. Your brother talks about you constantly, Jennifer told me when we had a moment alone. I was actually kind of nervous to meet you. You're like his hero. That's ridiculous, I said, but I was touched. He's the hero. He saved my life. He says you saved each other. She smiled knowingly. He told me about how you didn't know each other existed until the transplant. That's incredible. You two are like a miracle. We got lucky, I said. I don't think it was luck. I think it was meant to be. 6 months later, Marcus and Jennifer got engaged. He called me immediately after proposing, his voice shaking with excitement. She said yes. Sarah, she said yes. Of course she said yes, you idiot. She's crazy about you. Will you be in the wedding? I want you to do a reading or something. Is that weird? That's not weird at all. I'd be honored. The wedding was beautiful, held in a garden in late spring when everything was in bloom. I did a reading from Corinthians about love, though I chose a less traditional translation that focused on love's action rather than its feeling. As I read, I looked out at the assembled guests. My parents, his parents, our extended families. All these people who had been brought together by the strange circumstances that had connected Marcus and me. At the reception, Marcus pulled me onto the dance floor during a slow song. I need to tell you something, he said as we swayed to the music. If you're about to tell me you're pregnant, we need to have a serious talk about biology. He laughed. No, not that. I wanted to tell you that Jennifer and I have been talking, and we want to name our first daughter Sarah, if you're okay with that. I stopped dancing. looking up at him with tears in my eyes. "You're going to make me cry at your wedding. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. That's absolutely a yes." 3 years after the transplant, I met someone too. His name was David. He taught history at my school, and he had kind eyes and a patient soul. He knew my whole story before we even went on our first date, because by that point, everyone at school knew about Marcus and the transplant. It had become somewhat legendary, this tale of the brother who appeared out of nowhere to save his sister's life. David was wonderful about it all. He didn't treat me like I was fragile or broken. He understood that my medication schedule was non-negotiable and that I needed regular checkups. He came to dinner at Marcus's house and immediately hit it off with him and Jennifer, the 4 of us falling into an easy friendship. "I like him," Marcus told me after the first time they all met. "He's good for you, and he laughs at my jokes, which shows excellent judgment." "Your jokes are terrible." Jennifer laughs at them. Jennifer is obligated to laugh at them. She married you. On my 36th birthday, 4 years after the transplant, David proposed. We were hiking at Silver Falls, one of my favorite places, when he got down on one knee on a bridge overlooking the waterfall. I said yes before he even finished asking the question. Marcus and Jennifer hosted our engagement party, and standing in their backyard surrounded by everyone I loved, I felt almost overwhelmed by how different my life looked from what I'd imagined 4 years ago. Then I'd been facing death, alone in all the ways that mattered. Now I had Marcus, his family, his wife, my fiancé, a future full of possibility. "Speech!" someone called out, and everyone took up the chant. I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, I said, raising my glass. 4 years ago, I was dying. That's not an exaggeration or melodrama. Without a kidney transplant, I had maybe a year left. I was terrified, and I felt very alone, even though I had loving parents and wonderful friends. And then Marcus appeared in my life like something out of a fairy tale. This brother I never knew existed, offering to save my life without a second thought. I had to pause to collect myself, and Marcus came to stand beside me, putting his arm around my shoulders. "He gave me his kidney," I continued, "but that was just the beginning. He gave me a family I didn't know I was missing. He gave me a connection that has enriched every single day since we met. He taught me that family isn't just about shared history or growing up together. It's about showing up for each other, about sacrifice and love, and choosing each other every day. So thank you, Marcus, for everything. For the kidney, obviously, but more importantly, for being my brother." There wasn't a dry eye in the yard, including mine and Marcus's. Jennifer handed us both tissues, laughing through her own tears. "You two are going to ruin my makeup," she said. David came over and kissed my forehead. "That was beautiful," he whispered. The party continued late into the evening, and at one point, I found myself alone with Marcus on the back porch, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. "Can you believe this is our life?" I asked him. 4 years ago, we didn't even know each other existed. "I think about that all the time," Marcus admitted. "About how many tiny things had to go exactly right for us to find each other. If I hadn't joined the donor registry, if you hadn't gotten sick, though I hate thinking about that part. If the genetic matching system had missed the connection, there were so many points where this all could have gone differently. But it didn't. We found each other. Found at last," he said, touching his bracelet. I touched my necklace in response, the ritual we'd developed over the years. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Jennifer and I are pregnant. We found out last week." I screamed and threw my arms around him. "Oh my God! Congratulations! How far along is she?" 8 weeks. We wanted to wait to tell people, but I couldn't keep it from you. You're going to be an aunt, Sarah. And if it's a girl, we're keeping our promise. She'll be Sarah." I was crying again. happy tears that seem to come so easily these days. I can't believe I'm going to be an aunt. Does this mean I have to be responsible and mature? Absolutely not. I'm counting on you to be the fun aunt who lets her get away with everything. 8 months later, I stood in a hospital room, watching Marcus hold his newborn daughter for the first time. She was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and her father's nose. Jennifer looked exhausted but radiant, and when they placed the baby in my arms, I felt my heart expand in ways I didn't know were possible. "Meet your Aunt Sarah," Marcus said to his daughter. "She's the best person I know, and you're named after her because she's pretty amazing." "Stop, you're going to make me cry on your daughter," I said. But I was already crying. Little Sarah, we'd taken to calling her Sally to avoid confusion, wrapped her tiny hand around my finger, and I felt the same inexplicable connection I'd felt when I first met Marcus. This little person was my family, connected to me by blood and love, and the miracle that had brought her father and me together. 5 years after the transplant, I stood at the front of a classroom, but this time, it wasn't my students sitting in the seats. It was a room full of people who had gathered to hear Marcus and me speak about organ donation. We'd been doing these talks for a couple of years, sharing our story in hopes of encouraging more people to register as donors. "The thing people don't realize," Marcus was saying, "is that being a living donor isn't this huge, scary thing. Yes, it's surgery, and yes, there's recovery time. But the impact you can have on someone's life is immeasurable. I gave my sister a kidney, and in return, I got a family member I never knew existed. That's a pretty good trade." After the presentation, a young woman approached us. She was maybe 25, with nervous eyes and twisted hands. "My brother needs a kidney," she said quietly. "I'm a match, but I'm scared. What if something goes wrong?" Marcus and I exchanged glances, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. This was why we did these talks, for moments exactly like this. "It's okay to be scared," I told her. Marcus was scared. But here's what I know. The regret of not helping when you can is worse than any fear of surgery. If you're a match and you're able to do this, you'll be giving your brother the most precious gift possible, and you'll have a story that bonds you forever. "We're living proof," Marcus added, "and we're here to support you through this if you decide to move forward. You're not alone." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you both." As we drove home that evening, I thought about all the people we'd talked to over the years, all the stories we'd heard, all the lives that had been saved or changed through organ donation. Our story had become bigger than just us. It had become a beacon of hope for other people facing similar situations. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked Marcus. "Giving me your kidney?" He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Are you serious right now?" "Sarah, giving you my kidney was the best decision I ever made. It brought me you. It brought me Jennifer through you. It made Sally possible. My entire life is better because of that choice. The only thing I regret is all the years we didn't know each other." "Me too," I admitted. "Sometimes I think about what our childhood would have been like if we'd grown up together. Would we have been close? Would we have fought all the time?" "Probably both," Marcus said with a laugh. "But we can't change the past. We can only make the most of the time we have now." 6 years after the transplant, David and I got married. It was a small ceremony, just close family and friends, held at the same garden where Marcus and Jennifer had gotten married. Marcus was my man of honor, standing beside me in a suit that matched David's, and when the officiant asked who gave me away, both Marcus and my father stepped forward together. "We both do," my father said, and Marcus nodded. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. At the reception, Marcus gave a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. "I've only known my sister for 6 years," he began, but I feel like I've known her forever. From the moment we met, it was like finding a missing piece of myself that I didn't know was lost. Sarah is brilliant, compassionate, stubborn as hell, and one of the bravest people I know. David, you're getting an incredible woman, but you should know that you're also getting me. We're a package deal. She's literally carrying a piece of me inside her, so there's no getting rid of me. Everyone laughed, and I mouthed, "I love you," to him from across the room. But seriously, Marcus continued, his voice growing more emotional. Watching Sarah live her life, achieve her dreams, find love, it makes everything we went through worth it. She's not just surviving anymore, she's thriving. And I get to witness that every day. That's the real gift of being a donor. Not just that you save someone's life, but that you get to watch them live it. 7 years after the transplant, Jennifer and Marcus had their second child, a son they named Thomas after Marcus's father. I was there for his birth too, and watching Sally meet her baby brother for the first time was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. "Gentle," Jennifer instructed, as Sally touched the baby's tiny hand. "He's very small." "Like me when I was a baby?" Sally asked. "Exactly like you." Sally looked up at me with serious eyes. "Aunt Sarah, are you going to love Tommy as much as you love me?" I crouched down to her level. "I'm going to love him exactly as much as I love you, which is more than all the stars in the sky." "That's a lot of love," Sally said, satisfied. David and I had been trying for a baby of our own for the past year, but my doctors had concerns about pregnancy with my medical history. The medications I took for the transplant could complicate things, and there were risks involved that made everyone nervous. We'd been discussing adoption, exploring options, trying to figure out what our family would look like. "It doesn't matter how we become parents," David assured me during one particularly difficult night when I was feeling the weight of my limitations. "What matters is that we will be parents, one way or another. Our family will be built on love, just like you and Marcus's relationship was." He was right, of course. Family had never been about biology alone. I was living proof of that. The person who had saved my life had been a stranger until the moment we needed each other most. 8 years after the transplant, on the anniversary of the surgery, Marcus and I started a new tradition. We spent the day together, just the two of us, hiking to a waterfall we'd discovered years ago. It was our way of honoring the journey we'd been on, of remembering where we'd come from and celebrating where we were. 8 years, Marcus said, as we sat on a rock overlooking the falls. "Sometimes it feels like we've been siblings forever, and sometimes I remember that moment in Dr. Morrison's office when I first learned about you, and it feels like yesterday." "I know exactly what you mean. Time is weird like that." "Sally asked me the other day why you and I didn't grow up together," Marcus said. "I didn't really know how to explain it to a 5-year-old. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes families find each other in unexpected ways, and that you and I were always meant to be brother and sister. We just took a long time to find each other." She seemed satisfied with that answer. "That's a good answer," I said. "It's the truth, just simplified." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water cascade down the rocks. The sound was soothing, a constant reminder of nature's persistence and power. I thought about how much had changed in 8 years, how my life had been completely transformed by the thing that had threatened to end it. "Sarah," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." My stomach tightened with worry. "What is it? Do you ever feel guilty about me giving you my kidney? Because sometimes I worry that you carry this weight of obligation or debt, and I don't want you to feel that way." I thought carefully about my answer. At first, yes. For a long time, actually. I felt like I owed you everything, like I could never possibly repay what you'd given me. But over time, I've come to understand that it wasn't a transaction. It was an act of love. And love doesn't keep score. You gave me your kidney because you wanted to, because we're family. And I've tried to honor that gift by living my life fully, by being the best sister I can be to you, by loving Sally and Tommy like they're my own. That's how I repay you, by living. Marcus's eyes were wet. That's all I've ever wanted, just for you to live and be happy. Then mission accomplished, I said, bumping my shoulder against his. I'm alive, I'm happy, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. 9 years after the transplant, David and I adopted a daughter. She was 3 years old, with big brown eyes and a shy smile, and her name was Elena. The moment we met her at the adoption agency, I knew she was meant to be ours. She'd been through more in her short life than any child should have to endure, and she needed a family who would love her unconditionally. Marcus and Jennifer were there when we brought Elena home for the first time. Sally and Tommy were excited to have a new cousin to play with, and watching Elena slowly warm up to all of them was magical. She was hesitant at first, uncertain about this loud, loving family she'd suddenly become part of. But Marcus had a gift with children, and within an hour, he had her laughing and playing. She's perfect, Marcus told me as we watched the kids play together. Congratulations, sis. You're a mom now. I'm terrified, I admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough for her? You're going to be amazing. Look at how much love you have to give. Elena is lucky to have you and David. He was right. Being a parent was hard and scary and wonderful, all at the same time. Elena had nightmares and trust issues, and a whole host of challenges that came from her difficult early years. But every day, she opened up a little more. Every day, she became more confident that this family was forever. The connection between Elena and Sally was especially beautiful to watch. Despite the age difference, they bonded quickly, and Sally took her role as older cousin very seriously. She would read to Elena, teach her games, and proudly introduce her to anyone who would listen as my cousin Elena. Family keeps growing, I told Marcus one day as we watched all the kids play together in his backyard. It just keeps expanding. That's the best part, he agreed. None of this would exist if you hadn't gotten sick. Elena wouldn't have these cousins. Sally and Tommy wouldn't have their Aunt Sarah. It's like this whole beautiful web of connections that started with one kidney. One kidney and one brave decision. 2 brave decisions, he corrected. You were brave too, Sarah. You chose to live, to fight, to accept help. That took courage. 10 years after the transplant, we threw a massive party. 10 years was a milestone worth celebrating. A decade of life I almost didn't have. A decade of family and love and connection. We rented a pavilion at a park and invited everyone. Both sets of parents, our extended families, friends, colleagues, even some of the people we'd met through our advocacy work for organ donation. Dr. Morrison came, bringing with him a dozen other patients from his transplant clinic. There were people there who'd received kidneys, livers, hearts, all of them celebrating the gift of life with their donors, or in honor of the donors they'd lost. The afternoon was filled with food and laughter and stories. Sally, now 8 years old, had organized a talent show with the other kids. Elena, 6 now, and so much more confident than when she first came to us, performed a dance she'd choreographed herself. Tommy, just 3, mostly just ran around causing cheerful chaos. As the sun began to set, Marcus and I found ourselves once again apart from the crowd, standing by the lake that bordered the park. 10 years, I said, not for the first time that day. 10 years, Marcus echoed. Sometimes I try to imagine what my life would be like if I hadn't joined that donor registry. If I'd been too scared or too busy or just never got around to it. And I can't. I literally cannot imagine my life without you in it now. Same. It's like you've always been there, even though I know you haven't. Marcus turned to face me, taking both my hands in his. "I need to tell you something I've never told you before." My heart rate picked up. "You're scaring me." "Don't be scared. It's nothing bad. It's just..." The day of the transplant, right before they wheeled me into surgery, I had this moment of absolute terror. Not about the surgery itself, but about what it would mean afterward. What if you didn't like me? What if we didn't get along? What if I went through all of this and we ended up being strangers who shared an organ but nothing else? "Marcus, let me finish. I was lying there, about to give you a kidney, and I was terrified that it wouldn't be enough. That the organ would save your life, but we wouldn't actually become family. And then I woke up after the surgery, and you were there in my room. They wheeled you in, remember? And you smiled at me with tears running down your face, and you said, 'Thank you, little brother.' And I knew right then that everything was going to be okay, that we were going to be okay. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. I was so scared too. Scared that I'd disappoint you, that I wouldn't be the sister you hoped for." "You exceeded every hope I had," Marcus said firmly. "Sarah, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Not just because you brought Jennifer and the kids and all of this into my life, but because you're you. You're brilliant and funny and kind, and exactly the sister I would have chosen if I'd been given a choice." We hugged tightly, and I could feel him shaking slightly with emotion. Over his shoulder, I could see our family gathered in the pavilion. His wife and children, my husband and daughter. Our parents all laughing together. This beautiful, complex, perfect family that had been built on sacrifice and love. But then I noticed something that made me pull back slightly. There was a man standing at the edge of the gathering, watching us. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face. He looked familiar somehow, though I couldn't place where I'd seen him before. "Marcus," I said quietly, "do you know who that is?" Marcus turned to look and went very still. The color drained from his face, and his grip on my hand tightened. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's impossible." "What? Who is he?" But Marcus was already walking toward the man, and I hurried to follow. As we got closer, I could see the resemblance more clearly. The man had Marcus's nose, his jawline, his build. And suddenly I understood. "James?" Marcus said, his voice uncertain. The man nodded, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "Hello, son. I know I have no right to be here, but I heard about what you did, about the transplant, and I had to see you, had to see both of you. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. This was James, Marcus's biological father, my mother's first love, the man who had left her pregnant and alone all those years ago. And now he was here, crashing our celebration, disrupting the carefully constructed peace of our family. "How did you find us?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "I've been following your story," James admitted, "after your mother contacted me a few years ago." "Wait," I interrupted. "My mother contacted you?" James looked at me with eyes that were achingly familiar. "You must be Sarah. You look like your mother did when she was young." "Yes, she reached out to me about 5 years ago. She wanted me to know about Marcus, about what he'd done. She thought I deserved to know I had a son who was capable of such selflessness." Marcus was trembling now, and I moved closer to him, offering support. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "Nothing," James said quickly. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to see you, to tell you how proud I am, even though I have no right to be. To apologize for not being there, for all the years I missed. I was young and stupid and scared, and by the time I grew up enough to realize what I'd thrown away, it was too late." "It's not too late," a voice said behind us, and we all turned to see my mother standing there. She'd been watching the conversation, I realized, probably from the moment James arrived. It's never too late to try to make things right. Mom, I said, moving to her side. Did you know he was coming? She nodded, her eyes never leaving James. I invited him. I should have told you both, I know. But I hoped maybe it was time. You've built such a beautiful family, and I thought perhaps there was room for one more broken piece to find its place. Marcus was silent, processing this information. I could feel the conflict radiating off him. Anger at being ambushed, curiosity about this man who was his biological father, uncertainty about what this meant for the future. I don't expect anything, James said again. I just wanted you to know that I've lived with the regret of abandoning your mother every single day. And knowing that you exist. That you grew up to be this incredible man who saves lives. It's more than I deserve. But I'm grateful. So grateful. There was a long, tense silence. Then Marcus spoke, his voice carefully controlled. I had a father. Tom Thompson raised me, loved me, was there for every moment of my life. He's the only father I've ever needed. I know, James said, and I would never try to take his place. I just hoped. I don't know. I hoped we might be able to talk sometime, get to know each other. Not as father and son, but as people who share a connection. Marcus looked at me and I could see the question in his eyes. What should he do? I squeezed his hand, offering support, but leaving the decision to him. Maybe, Marcus finally said. Maybe we can talk. But not today. Today is about celebrating Sarah's life and our family. If you want to be part of this, you need to understand that it's on our terms. We've built something beautiful here, and I won't let anyone disrupt that. I understand, James said, relief evident in his face. Thank you. That's more than I dared hope for. My mother stepped forward and touched James's arm. There's a coffee shop on Morrison Street, the Blue Door. Meet us there next Saturday at 2. We'll all talk then, you, me, Marcus, and Sarah. We'll figure out what this looks like going forward. James nodded, tears now flowing freely down his face. Thank you. Thank you both, all of you. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw pain and regret and hope all mixed together. I'm sorry I wasn't there for your mother when she needed me. I'm sorry I missed knowing you. But I'm so glad you found each other. After he left, Marcus and I stood in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Our parents gathered around us, everyone talking at once, offering explanations and apologies and support. I'm sorry, my mother said to Marcus. I should have asked before inviting him, but I thought, maybe it was time for you to have the option of knowing him. You don't have to, of course. But I wanted to give you that choice. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I need some time to think about this. Of course, my mother said. Take all the time you need. The party continued, but the mood had shifted slightly. The easy joy had been complicated by the appearance of this ghost from the past. Marcus was quieter than usual, though he tried to maintain his cheerful demeanor for the kids. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and David had taken Elena to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. I sat on our back porch wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. You awake? Yeah. Can't sleep. Same. Can I call you? Always. His voice when he answered was tired and confused. I don't know how to feel about any of this, Sarah. For 28 years, I've known I was adopted. For 10 years, I've known you existed. And now suddenly there's this third piece, our biological father. It's too much. You don't have to have all the answers right now, I said gently. You don't even have to meet with him if you don't want to. Just because he showed up doesn't mean you owe him anything. But maybe I want to. That's the part that's confusing me. Part of me is angry that he abandoned our mother, that he wasn't there for us. But part of me is curious. What if there are things about myself that make more sense if I know him? What if there's something valuable in having that connection? Those are all valid feelings, I said. You're allowed to be angry and curious and confused all at the same time. What would you do? He asked. I thought about it carefully. I think I'd meet with him. Not because he deserves it, but because you deserve to have all the information. You deserve to know where you came from, all of it. But I'd also be very careful about how much of your life you let him into. He lost the right to be your father a long time ago. If he wants to be in your life now, he has to earn that privilege. That's wise, Marcus said. When did you get so wise? I learned from my little brother, I said, and I could hear him laugh softly on the other end of the line. We talked for another hour, processing the day's events, supporting each other the way we always had. By the time we hung up, I felt more settled, and I hoped Marcus did too. The following Saturday, the four of us met at the Blue Door, the same coffee shop where Marcus and I had first met 10 years ago. It felt fitting somehow, returning to the place where our relationship had begun to now navigate this new, complicated addition to our family story. James was already there when we arrived, sitting nervously at a corner table. He stood when he saw us, his hands trembling slightly. My mother took the lead, greeting him with a careful warmth that suggested years of complicated history. We sat down, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then James cleared his throat. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough, not nearly enough, but I am truly, deeply sorry for the pain I caused. I was 21, immature, and terrified of responsibility. When your mother told me she was pregnant, I ran. It's the biggest regret of my life. My mother's face was carefully neutral. I've made peace with that, James. It took years, but I did. I had a good life. I met a wonderful man, raised a beautiful daughter, and eventually found my way back to my son. The question now is what happens going forward. I don't expect to be a father to you, James said, looking at Marcus. I know I lost that right. But I'd like to be in your life, if you'll let me. To know you, to know Sarah. I'm a musician. I tour with a jazz band, which is probably part of why I was so unstable back then. But I've settled down now. I live in Seattle, I teach music part-time, and I have a daughter from a later relationship. Her name is Maya. She's 15. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Another sibling. Another piece of the puzzle we hadn't known was missing. Does Maya know about us? I asked. She does now. I told her about you both after I heard your story. She was angry at first. Angry that I'd kept this secret from her. Angry that she had siblings she'd never met. But she's curious too. She wants to meet you if you're willing. The conversation continued for 2 hours. James told us about his life, his mistakes, his journey to becoming someone worth knowing. My mother shared her own story of healing and forgiveness. Marcus and I mostly listened, trying to understand how this new piece fit into the family we'd built. As we were getting ready to leave, Marcus spoke up. I need time to process all of this, but I'm willing to try. To get to know you, to meet Maya. Sarah and I understand better than anyone what it means to find family later in life. We found each other when we needed each other most, and that changed everything. Maybe this is part of that same journey. James's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, I said quietly. It's about what we choose. Marcus and I choose to be open to this possibility. But understand that you're entering a family that already exists, already works. You're a guest, not the foundation. I understand, James said. And I'm grateful. So grateful. Over the next year, we slowly integrated James and Maya into our lives. It was awkward at first. Family dinners where no one quite knew how to act. Conversations that felt forced and uncomfortable. But gradually, it became easier. Maya was a talented pianist, and watching her play reminded me so much of Marcus's guitar skills. She bonded quickly with Sally, who was thrilled to have another older cousin. James was careful to respect the boundaries we set. He never tried to claim a parental role with Marcus, never pushed for more than we were willing to give. He showed up for birthdays and holidays when invited, but didn't demand inclusion. Slowly, he earned his place on the periphery of our family. 11 years after the transplant, Marcus and I did another speaking engagement, this time at a national conference on organ donation. We'd become somewhat known in the transplant community for our story and our advocacy work. As we stood on stage together, looking out at hundreds of faces, I felt the weight of what we represented. My brother saved my life, I told the audience. But more than that, he showed me what family really means. It's not about biology alone, though that's part of our story. It's not about growing up together, because we didn't. It's about showing up for each other in the moments that matter. It's about sacrifice and love and choosing each other every single day. When I joined the donor registry, Marcus added, I never imagined it would lead here. I thought maybe I'd help a stranger, give someone a chance at life. I never dreamed I'd find my sister, that I'd gain a family, that one decision would ripple out to touch so many lives. But that's the power of choosing to help. You never know what doors it might open, what connections it might create. After the conference, a teenage girl approached us. She was maybe 16, with nervous energy and a determination in her eyes that reminded me of myself. My mom needs a kidney, she said without preamble. I'm a match. I want to do it, but my dad says I'm too young, that I should wait. But what if waiting means she dies? What if I could save her but I don't because I'm scared? Marcus crouched down to her level. How old are you? 16. That is young for such a big decision. But here's what I know. If you're medically able to do this, if the doctors say it's safe, and if you truly want to help your mom, then you should. The fear is real and it's valid. But the regret of not helping when you could would be worse. I promise you that. Do you ever regret it? The girl asked, looking at both of us. Never, Marcus and I said simultaneously, then laughed. Not for a single second, I added. He gave me my life back. That's not something you regret. The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. I needed to hear that. 12 years after the transplant, Elena turned 9, and we threw her a big birthday party. She'd requested a family talent show, inspired by the one Sally used to organize when they were younger. Everyone participated. Sally sang a song she'd written herself. Tommy performed magic tricks that were more enthusiasm than skill. Maya played the piano. Marcus sang while James accompanied on guitar, their first real collaboration. When it was Elena's turn, she stood up nervously and pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote something, she said in her quiet voice. It's about family. She read a poem she'd written about being adopted, about finding a place to belong, about learning that family wasn't just the people you were born to, but the people who chose to love you. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. That's beautiful, sweetheart, I told her, pulling her into a hug. You're such a talented writer. I learned from the best, Elena said, smiling at me. You always say that words have power. I wanted to use mine to tell you thank you for choosing me. I held her tighter, overwhelmed by love for this child who had come into our lives and made everything richer. We didn't choose you, Elena. We found each other. Just like your Uncle Marcus and I did. That night, after all the guests had left and Elena was asleep, David and I sat on the couch together. We did good, he said, pulling me close. We did, I agreed. Despite everything, the illness, the fear, all the complications, we built something beautiful. Your brother really did save your life. He did, but I think maybe I saved his too in a way. We saved each other. 13 years after the transplant, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It was early stage, but the prognosis wasn't good. She would decline, the doctor said, losing memories and pieces of herself over time. It was devastating news that brought our entire family together in grief and determination to make the most of whatever time we had left. Marcus took it particularly hard. He'd only known our mother for 13 years, and now that time was being cut short. "It's not fair," he said to me one night. "I just found her. I just got to know her. I'm not ready to lose her." "None of us are ready," I said gently. "But we'll face this together, just like we faced everything else." We created a memory book for her, filling it with photos and stories from her life. James contributed too, sharing memories from their brief time together 50 years ago. My mother would sit with the book, running her fingers over the photos, sometimes remembering, sometimes confused, but always smiling. "I have a son named Marcus," she would say, even on her worst days. "He saved my daughter's life. He gave her his kidney." "That's right, Mom," I would tell her. "He did. That's love," she would say. "That's what love looks like." 14 years after the transplant, Marcus turned 42. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and he'd developed laugh lines around his eyes from years of smiling. We celebrated with a family barbecue at his house, the yard full of children and adults and laughter. Sally was 16 now, preparing for college. Tommy was 11, all energy and enthusiasm. Elena was 10, quiet but confident in a way she hadn't been when we first adopted her. Maya was 22, graduated from college and working as a music therapist. New partners and friends had been added to the family over the years, each one welcomed into the fold. As the party wound down, Marcus and I found ourselves once again apart from the crowd, standing by his garden where he grew tomatoes and herbs. 14 years, I said. It had become our ritual, marking the time. 14 years, Marcus echoed. More than a third of my life now. I can barely remember what it was like before you. Same. You've always been my brother, even before I knew you existed. Marcus picked a tomato and handed it to me. I was thinking about what Mom said the other day, about love, about how giving you my kidney was what love looks like. And I realized she's right. But it's not the whole picture. What do you mean? Love isn't just the big dramatic gesture. It's not just the kidney transplant or the surgery or that one moment of sacrifice. Love is all the moments after. It's the Sunday dinners and the stupid jokes and the phone calls when one of us is having a bad day. It's showing up for Elena's school plays and Sally's volleyball games and Tommy's science fairs. It's the ordinary, everyday choosing to be in each other's lives. I felt tears prick my eyes. When did you become so philosophical? I've always been philosophical. You just weren't around for the first 28 years to appreciate it. We laughed, and it felt good, easy, natural. This was what Marcus meant. The love wasn't just in the dramatic moment when he'd given me his kidney. It was in every moment since, every choice we'd made to stay connected, to build a life together, to be family in the fullest sense of the word. 15 years after the transplant, I stood in Dr. Morrison's office again. He was older now, preparing for retirement, but his kind eyes were the same. He reviewed my latest test results with a smile. "Your kidney function is excellent," he said. "The transplant has been incredibly successful. You're one of my longest-running success stories, Sarah. You and Marcus both are." "We've been lucky," I said. "It's not luck," Dr. Morrison corrected gently. "It's good medicine, yes, but it's also something more. The bond you and Marcus share, the support system you've built. It all contributes to your health. The human body doesn't exist in isolation. We're shaped by our relationships, our connections. You two are living proof of that. As I drove home from that appointment, I thought about everything that had happened in 15 years. I'd gone from facing death to building a life richer than I'd ever imagined possible. I had a husband who loved me, a daughter who amazed me daily, a brother who had given me everything, and a family that had grown in ways I never could have predicted. The disease that should have ended my life had instead opened it up in ways I never knew were possible. It had brought me Marcus, and Marcus had brought me everyone else. It was like dropping a stone in a pond and watching the ripples expand outward, touching shores I hadn't even known existed. That night, the whole family gathered at our house for dinner. A normal Tuesday night dinner that had somehow become a tradition. Marcus and Jennifer, Sally and Tommy, my parents, Tom and Linda, James and Maya, David and Elena. All of us crowded around our dining room table, talking over each other, laughing, arguing good-naturedly about everything from politics to the best pizza toppings. I looked around at these faces, these people who had become my world, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 15 years ago, I'd been dying alone. Now I was living, surrounded by more love than I knew what to do with. "Speech!" Sally called out, banging her fork on her glass. "Aunt Sarah looks like she has something to say." "I wasn't planning on it," I protested, but everyone was looking at me expectantly. "Come on, Mom," Elena urged. "You always have something to say." I stood up, my wine glass in hand, and looked at Marcus first. He smiled at me encouragingly. My brother, my donor, my friend. 15 years ago, I began. Dr. Morrison told me they'd found a match for my transplant. It was a brother I never knew existed. In that moment, my entire world changed. Not just because I was going to live, though that was obviously important, but because I was going to gain a family I hadn't known I was missing. I turned to look at everyone gathered around the table. Every person in this room is here because of that moment. Marcus and I found each other, and that connection created all of this. Sally and Tommy wouldn't have Aunt Sarah. Elena wouldn't have Uncle Marcus. James and Maya wouldn't have found their way back to us. All of these connections, all of this love, it started with one decision, one act of extraordinary generosity. My voice caught, and Marcus stood up to stand beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "But here's what I've learned," I continued. "The kidney was just the beginning. Marcus didn't just give me an organ. He gave me a brother. He gave me a family. He gave me a reason to believe in things that seem impossible. He showed me that love isn't limited by time or circumstance, that family is something you build through choice and commitment and showing up for each other every single day. So thank you, Marcus, for saving my life. But more than that, thank you for being my brother. Thank you for every Sunday dinner, and every hiking trip, and every stupid joke. Thank you for Sally and Tommy, for letting me be their aunt. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't about biology or history. It's about love. It's always been about love." The room erupted in applause and tears and laughter. Marcus hugged me tightly, and I could feel him shaking with emotion. "I love you, sis," he whispered in my ear. "I love you too, little brother. Always." As the evening continued and eventually wound down, I found myself on the back porch again, my favorite spot for reflection. David came out and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, kissing the top of my head. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm perfect," I said honestly. I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined. 15 years ago, I thought I was dying. I thought my story was ending. But it was just beginning. "That's a good story," David said. "One worth sharing." He was right. It was a story worth sharing. Not just the dramatic moments, but all of it. The fear and the hope, the loss and the finding, The ordinary and the extraordinary all mixed together. It was a story about family and love and the ways we save each other, sometimes with grand gestures and sometimes just by showing up. It was a story about a doctor saying, "We found a match for your transplant. It's the brother you never knew existed." And how those words changed everything. As I sat there in the cool evening air, touching the necklace Marcus had given me years ago, found at last, I realized that this was the greatest gift of all. Not just the kidney that saved my life, but the relationship that made that life worth living. We had found each other when we needed each other most, and we had built something beautiful from that connection. The future stretched ahead of us, uncertain but hopeful. There would be more challenges, more losses, more moments of joy and sorrow. My mother's Alzheimer's would progress. The kids would grow up and create lives of their own. Marcus and I would get older, gray hair turning to white, laugh lines deepening. But through it all, we would have each other. We would have this family we'd built through choice and love and impossible circumstances. That was enough. That was everything. If you've made it this far in our story, thank you for taking this journey with us. Stories of hope and family like this one remind us that miracles can happen in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the greatest blessings. If our story has touched your heart, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you experienced an unexpected connection that changed your life? Do you have your own story of finding family in surprising places? Share your thoughts, and if you believe in the power of these kinds of stories, please consider sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Sometimes we all need a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us in the most surprising ways.